Good. Yeah, I just noticed that ABC has organized an online Yumne. That's really amazing. Really wonderful. But maybe challenging also for people to stay at home and not eat. Especially if they have other people, their family members, they're eating food and they have to fast. It could be difficult. You have to be very, very strong, very determined. Okay, so welcome everyone. And this is the third talk in a series of talks on the topic of how to find peace in a chaotic world. And so what we're looking at is mainly how to find peace of mind, how to have a more peaceful mind, even when there are problems outside of us, in the world, in our country, in our family, in our workplace. I mean, from the Buddhist point of view, there's nothing surprising about the existence of problems. It's just it's the nature of our existence in samsara. Samsara, what we call cyclic existence, this situation in which we are not enlightened beings. We have not become like the Buddha. We are not, we haven't attained nirvana. So as long as we haven't attained those states, we are in samsara, and it's just the normal state of things in samsara that there are problems, many, many, many problems. And so, I mean, if we really understand the Buddhist teachings, we shouldn't be surprised or shocked when we hear about problems. I mean, there are, of course, it is shocking. Just the other day, here in America, a 15-year-old student in high school, he had a gun and he just started shooting. I think he fired about 30 shots with his gun and he killed four of his fellow students, and many others were wounded. So, I mean, that kind of thing it is shocking. Very, very shocking, very terrible. But we are in samsara, and the meaning of being in samsara is that people and other living beings have these afflictions in our mind. We have anger, hatred. So he must have been angry for some reason. They don't know what he was angry about, but you don't do that kind of thing unless you're angry. Maybe he was mentally disturbed as well. Maybe he had some mental problem. But usually violent actions like that are motivated by anger, hatred. So we all have anger, although most of us manage to control our anger so we don't go out and shoot people. But we may do other things. We may shoot off our mouth. We may shoot people with our mouth, saying kind of hurtful things. Yeah. So anyway, that's one of the delusions, one of the afflictions that beings have in samsara. And then we also have greed. So there's lots of stories of greed. People, often people in positions of power use their power to amass wealth and, even do illegal things and deprive other people of their wealth just so that they can accumulate more and more and more for themselves. And so there's lots of stories of that kind of thing happening. And so on. So there's so many delusions that afflict us living beings in samsara. And these delusions come up in our mind and they motivate us to do these terrible things. And the main problem, according to Buddhism, is ignorance, that we don't see things correctly. We don't see our own self, our I, how we exist, who we are, what we are. We are mistaken about that. We grossly exaggerate our own existence and our importance. We think we're the most important person in the world, so we can do whatever we want, even hurt other people. So that's a very common attitude that people have, and we all have ignorance and self-centeredness, and we have ignorance about others and everything in the world around us. We don't see things correctly, accurately, and so it's as though we are blind, as though, you know, there's veils covering our eyes, causing us to see things in a distorted way, and it's in that state that we then get caught up in these delusions and then act out in hurtful ways. So this is just the nature of samsara. And the Buddha was once in samsara too. He wasn't always Buddha. He wasn't always enlightened. So he was once in samsara, and he had the same kind of problems we have. But he managed to find a way out, and was very, very kind and compassionate to teach. He spent most of his life teaching, explaining how to get out. Many people listened to his teachings, practiced them, and they also found a way out. And so 2,500 years later, we still have the good fortune to meet the Buddhist teachings and learn them and practice them. And so there's a lot of information and a lot of practices or methods within Buddhism that help us to be peaceful, have a peaceful state of mind, even when there's terrible things happening outside of us. We don't have to become depressed, feel hopeless, feel pessimistic, have a negative outlook. We can keep our mind positive, even with these terrible things going on. So last week, I spoke about, I started talking in the first week about the 4 keys to well-being, which were identified by Dr. Richard Davidson. He's a neurologist and psychologist, and also a Buddhist meditator, practices Buddhist meditation, and does a lot of research on the brain, on the mind, and showing people how to have a more healthy mind. In fact, he started a center called a Center for Healthy Minds or something like that. So he's trying to help people make their minds better, more positive, more healthy. So he said that he and his colleagues did a lot of research on different mind states, and they found these 4 that are particularly helpful for having a more peaceful, positive state of mind, and also physical well-being, so physical and mental well-being. The first of the 4 was, I forgot. It'll come back. But the second one is outlook or perspective. So that's what we mainly focused on last time, outlook or perspective. So this means how we see things, how we interpret things, people, how we see other people, and how we see situations and events, and even how we see ourselves. And so some people have an easy time with this. They are just kind of easily, it's easy for them to see the good, to see the good in other people, to see the good in the world and in situations and so on. So for some people, it just arises naturally, but some people may have the opposite habit, and they see only the negative qualities in people, the negative things in the world. So they tend to just focus on those things, and it's difficult for them to see the positive things. But this is something we can change. We can work on this and change this and learn to see things in a more positive way. There are a lot of positive things in the world and in people, because there's nobody who's 100% bad. Nobody is totally bad and doesn't have any good qualities at all. Everybody has some good qualities. So if we can see the good qualities in others and see the good things they're doing, that'll help our mind to be much lighter and happier, more positive. I heard of a man who was in prison, young man, and he told one Buddhist teacher who was trying to help the prisoners to learn meditation and Buddhism and so on. And so this young man, this prisoner, said that he keeps himself happy in prison by looking at the good qualities of the people around him. And that's quite extraordinary when you think about it. Because for one thing, being in prison is terrible. I mean, nobody likes being in prison, being locked up. Although many people experienced being locked up last year in lockdown. I think some people felt a bit like they were in prison. They couldn't, leave their home and so on and so forth. So, but that was painful. Yeah, people didn't like having to be locked up and not being able to go out. But being in prison is even worse than lockdown, because you have no freedom at all. You can't even have a phone or internet, and you have to follow the rules of the prison. So you're locked into your cell, you're locked behind bars. So terrible situation. And so being in prison and being able to keep your mind positive and happy would be very, very challenging. And when you think about it, we have a hard time keeping our mind happy, even when we're not in prison, even when we're totally free. We can do whatever we want, go wherever we want, but we still have a hard time keeping our mind happy. So imagine being able to keep your mind happy while you're in prison. And then the way he did it, seeing the good qualities of the people around him. I mean, that's also pretty challenging, because in prison, you're surrounded by people who aren't the nicest people in the world. They're criminals, right? So you got people around you who've committed crimes. And so they're probably, quite rough and probably have a lot of afflictions, a lot of delusions, a lot of bad habits. And then also the guards, the people who work in prisons, the guards, they're also not very nice people. They can be quite rough as well. I've heard really terrible stories of, here in America especially, terrible things that happen in prison. So I just found that extraordinary that this young man could be in that situation with those kinds of people and be able to see the good qualities in each person and keep his mind happy by doing that. So maybe that would be an inspiration for us to try to do the same, to try to see the good qualities of the people around us. And yeah, I thought that's brilliant. That's just amazing that he was able to do that. So that's kind of an illustration of how, if we are able to have a more positive outlook, a more positive perspective on the people around us, as well as on the situation we are in, instead of just focusing on what's wrong and what we don't like and what's missing, what we don't have, instead of focusing on that, instead focusing on what's good and what we do have. And I mean, just even the fact that we are alive. Yeah, we're still alive. We didn't die yet. So we still have our life. And we also have a lot of abilities with our body. We can walk, we can use our hands, and we can use our eyes. We can see, we can hear, we can speak. Our brain is working relatively well, not brain damage. So just reminding ourselves of how fortunate we are, because not everyone in the world is so fortunate, right? So we know many people have disabilities and aren't able to do all the things that we are able to do. So that's like an easy way to have a more positive outlook, a more positive perspective. Just looking at what we do have, what we are able to do, and then looking at the people around us and seeing this, a lot of good qualities in those people. So anyway, I thought that we would do a meditation on this because in his talk, where he spoke about these 4 keys, Richard Davidson said that one way we can have a more positive outlook, a more positive perspective, is by cultivating loving kindness and compassion. So these are practices in Buddhism, very, very common. I'm sure all of you have heard them and done them, but maybe some of you haven't. And so it might be nice to have just a little taste, a little experience of how we can cultivate more loving kindness and compassion for others, and that can help us have a more positive outlook. And in that way, keep our mind more peaceful, more happy. So get into a comfortable position for meditation. So it's good when meditating to keep your back straight. Try to sit up straight if you can. So whether you're sitting on a chair or you're sitting on a cushion with your legs crossed, either way, try to keep your back straight, because that helps our mind to be more clear. But keeping the back straight doesn't mean being tense. Okay, so don't let your body be tense and rigid. Let your body be relaxed as much as possible, free of tension. So relax your shoulders, your neck, your back. If there is any tension anywhere in your body, you can imagine that it kind of melts and then flows out of you. And just imagine it disappearing into the earth below. And let your breath flow in and out in a natural way. Don't try to control your breath or manipulate your breath. Just allow your body to breathe as it normally does. And let your mind settle down. If there are any thoughts in your mind from what you were doing earlier today or yesterday or any time in the past, just let those thoughts go, put them aside. Let your mind be in the present moment, present place, right where you are right now. Also put aside any thoughts of the future, plans you have for later today or tonight or tomorrow. You can always think about those things later, but decide that for now, you're just going to let your mind, your awareness be right here, present moment, present place. Just being aware of your breathing, flowing in and flowing out. Now, go inside of your mind, inside of your heart, and get in touch with your natural wish to be happy, to have good experiences, and to not have any suffering or bad experiences. So this is almost like a little voice inside that says, I just want to be happy and I don't want to be unhappy. I don't want to suffer. And even if we're not always aware of it, it's underneath all of our actions, our decisions, everything we do, all the choices we make. We're always trying to find happiness and good experiences and trying to avoid unhappiness and bad experiences. There's nothing wrong with feeling this way. So don't judge yourself and think it's selfish to want to be happy. According to Buddhism, we should be happy. We deserve to be happy. It's our right as human beings, as living beings. And the Buddha wants us to be happy. But now contemplate that every other person and every other being feels exactly the same way. They all want to be happy and to not suffer. So first, think of some people you are close to, like family, friends, people you really care about. Imagine those people in front of you. And then contemplate, they're just like me. Deep down inside, they just want to be happy. They don't want to be unhappy, to suffer. And now bring to mind some people that you are not so close to. This could be neighbors, people living in the same apartment building as you, or if you live in a house, people living in other houses on your street, or people at work, people you work with. Bring to mind some of those people, or just think of them wherever they are right now. And think that they're just like me. Deep down inside, they just want to be happy. And they don't want any problems or pain or bad experiences. Now think of someone you have difficulty with. Better not to think of your worst enemy, someone you really have a lot of anger towards. So instead, think of someone towards whom you just have kind of mild feelings of dislike or irritation or impatience. Imagine that person in front of you. And then contemplate that this person is basically just like me. Deep down in their mind and their heart, they have the wish to be happy, to have good experiences. They don't want any suffering or bad experiences. And the things that they do that we find annoying or irritating, or we think are wrong or bad, are probably just attempts to find happiness and to relieve their suffering. They may not be very wise or skillful ways of finding happiness and relieving suffering, but maybe that's the only way the person knows how to achieve their aims based on their life experiences, on their karma, and so on. Maybe they just don't know any other way to achieve happiness and be free of suffering. Now try to expand this awareness of how all beings are the same in wanting to be happy and not suffer. Try to expand this to everyone, to all living beings, all human beings and other kinds of beings. Try to understand that we are all the same in wanting to be happy, wanting to avoid suffering and problems. And then see if you can feel how wonderful it would be if we could achieve our wishes, our goals. If we could all find the happiness we wish for and be free of the suffering we don't want. How wonderful it would be if everyone could have their needs fulfilled. Having food, shelter, clothing, access to medical care, loving friends and family, feeling safe, being in a peaceful place. How wonderful if everyone could have those things. And how wonderful it would be if all living beings could be free of all painful suffering experiences. Nobody wants those kind of experiences. How wonderful if all beings could be free of pain, physical pain, injuries, disabilities, hunger, thirst. being too hot or too cold. And also, if they could be free of all mental suffering, like fear, anxiety, grief, depression, feeling unloved, uncared for, unsafe, all the different kinds of sufferings of body and mind. If all of those could totally disappear for everyone, no one had to experience them. Try to feel how wonderful that would be. May all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all beings be free of suffering and the causes of suffering. May all beings never be separated from the happiness that is free of suffering, happiness of fortunate rebirths and liberation and enlightenment. And may all beings have equanimity, free of attachment that clings to some people and aversion that pushes others away. Our eyes. So those are just a few thoughts about how we can increase our feelings of loving kindness and compassion. And hopefully when you were doing those contemplations, you did feel positive. Your mind was more peaceful and joyful. And it's not terribly difficult. It's not like meditating on emptiness. That's much more difficult. It's relatively easy. And at the end, I was reciting the prayer of the 4 immeasurable thoughts. So that's kind of a very short, simple prayer we can memorize easily, and then we can recite it in just a few minutes and contemplate the meaning. And so just within a few minutes, we can make our mind more positive, have more positive thoughts and feelings for others. And so that's one helpful way of having more peace in our mind. And it's something we can do anywhere, anytime. You don't have to be sitting in a special place and formal meditation. You can do it at work, while traveling to or from work, when you're in a busy place like a shopping mall or a train station, there's a lot of people around you. You can just look at all those people and wish them happiness, wish them to be free of suffering. So just in a short time, a few minutes, we can change our mind from feeling negative and depressed to feeling more positive and happy. And another way that we can increase loving kindness is to contemplate how we are dependent on others. This is another meditation in the Tibetan tradition. Just contemplating how everything we have, starting from our body, this very body that we have, comes from others. It comes from our parents. But also we need food. We can't survive without food. And all the food that we eat comes from others. There's many, many people working very hard to grow the food in the fields and then transport it from the fields to the markets or to the restaurants, the food stalls. And then there are people working in those places to sell the food. And some of those people work really hard. I think they get up very early in the morning, and then they work all day until late in the evening making food for people. And so that's an example of kindness, the kindness we receive from others. Many, many people involved in providing us with the food that we need, and the same with the clothes that we wear, and places where we live, the house or apartment we live in, all the furniture we have, all the devices that we have, our computer, phone, iPad, and so on and so forth. All the books we read, the music we listen to, the entertainment we watch, and so on and so forth. Public transportation and electricity, water, lights, and so on. All of these things that we use in our life and that make our life comfortable, pleasant, enjoyable. All of these things come from other people. Many of these people we never even meet. They're working very hard, providing us with these things. We never meet them, but we still benefit from them. So this is a very, very nice meditation to do, a nice contemplation, just to think about the people who provide us with these things and how kind they are, how we receive their kindness. So that really helps us to open our hearts and feel more concerned for others. And gratitude, a feeling of gratitude, appreciation. And even when somebody makes a mistake, you go to a food stall and you order one kind of food, but maybe the way it's served isn't quite the way you want. Yeah. So you may feel annoyed at the person working there and angry at them and so on. Well, we're just human beings. We're not enlightened beings. We're not perfect beings. We're just normal human beings, and we make mistakes. So try to have some kindness and compassion for them and not be angry and treat them in a nasty way. And instead, just think how fortunate that we are able to have food. Like, for example, the other day I went in to get my booster, my COVID booster, together with one of the other nuns from the Abbey. And we had an appointment at the pharmacy to get our boosters. And we just expected that there wouldn't be any problem because we'd made an appointment. But when we got there, the pharmacist said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I only have one Moderna." We both needed Moderna because that's what we had the first time. He said, "I only have one Moderna left, and the other one, I can give you a Pfizer." So we were quite disappointed because without having an appointment, they would have saved us these two Moderna vaccines. And anyway, it was okay in the end. But at first it was like, hey, But she said, "I don't know who has an appointment. I don't know who, what kind of vaccines they need." And so I just felt kind of sorry for her, and didn't want to get angry at her. It wasn't her fault. So we just tried to be nice to her and just appreciate the fact that we were able to get vaccine. Many people in the world would like to have vaccines, but don't have access to them. So we're very, very fortunate to be in a place where there's vaccines and we get them for free. We don't have to pay for them. And yeah, all the people who produce these vaccines worked so hard, to try to create these vaccines to help us be safe and not get sick and die. So just focusing on the positive side, the positive side of things. So even it didn't turn out exactly how we wanted and how we expected, but looking at the positive side of things, we have realized you have nothing to complain about. So there's always a way of doing that, always a way of seeing the positive side of things. And that can really help us to cool down our impatience or our anger or our frustration or whatever. Also, just recognizing that getting upset, getting angry, what good does that do? How will that affect you, your mind, your body? It said that anger is actually very bad for us, bad for our heart, makes us more likely to get sick and have a short life. And it's very bad for our mind. Our mind gets very disturbed, very unhappy. So I'm quite convinced that anger is not the way to go. It's not a good choice to make. I mean, sometimes it comes up, angry thoughts, angry feelings come up, but just being able to recognize, oh, this is anger. And I don't want to follow anger because it's just going to disturb me, make me unhappy. And then I may disturb the people around me. They'll be unhappy. So there's just no benefit, no good coming from anger. So that's because anger is one of the things that's most disturbing to our mind. Guat Cheng asked about that last week, about getting angry. So even if we feel, I don't want to get angry, I don't like anger, I don't want to get angry, but sometimes it does come up. And yeah, that's one of the main causes for our mind to be disturbed and unpeaceful. And so yeah, it's very important to be able to recognize anger when it's there in our mind and do something about it so that you don't just get caught up in it and then start acting it out in your words, in your body, actions, body language, and so forth. So I thought to talk about a few other things we can do with anger. I mean, the good in Tibetan Buddhism, they say the only good thing about anger is that it's impermanent and you can get rid of it. But otherwise, yeah, anger just creates a lot of problems. So, yeah, so fortunately, anger is not something permanent. It's changeable by very nature. It comes and goes. It's not always there in our mind. And there are antidotes we can use. So loving kindness itself is an antidote to anger. So if we can make ourselves more familiar with loving kindness, compassion, seeing the good in other people, seeing the kindness in other people. So getting more and more familiar with that way of thinking, that way of seeing others, then that will help to decrease anger. We won't get so angry to start with, but it can still arise. And so when it does arise, some things we can remind ourselves of would be karma. If you believe in karma, that the actions we do bring results that we will experience later. So if we get angry and act out our anger, that will lead to suffering and problems in the future. So I'm quite convinced of that. And I don't want to have suffering and problems in the future. So it's not worth getting angry and acting out anger and then having those problems in the future. And it's also said to destroy our merit. So the good karma, the virtue, positive energy we create can be destroyed by getting angry. So that wouldn't be nice. We work so hard to create merit, then have it destroyed by anger. That's very, very sad. But another thing that's really helpful when feeling angry is just trying to understand the other person. What's going on with the other person? And if the person is behaving badly, if they're doing things that we think are wrong or bad or irritating, why are they doing those things? Why are they behaving that way? So we might know something about the person and know that maybe they're going through difficulties. Maybe there's some problems in their life. They lost a job, or some family member is very, very sick in the hospital. And so their mind is kind of disturbed and worried, and they're not in a good state of mind. And so that could be an explanation for why they're behaving the way that they do. So that might be helpful. But it could also be that there's nothing really going wrong in their life that's causing them to be unhappy and disturbed. It could just be delusions, mental afflictions that are coming up in their mind, and they're very strong and causing them to behave that way. Well, we know what it's like. We've been in that situation where our mind has been caught up in disturbing emotions, anger, greed, selfishness. So we can think about our own experiences where we've been in that state of mind, and how difficult it is, how painful it is, and how, we don't have any choice. These thoughts and feelings just come up in our mind and take over our mind, almost like being possessed by a demon. And then you're just acting under the control of, these demonic mental states. And so if you can think of the person in that way, they're just under the control of their afflictions, and that's painful. It's not pleasant. It's not peaceful and happy. Their mind is like really, really disturbed, unpeaceful. And they're probably creating a lot of bad karma, destructive karma in what they're doing. And as a result of that, and later on in the future, they're going to have even more suffering, more problems. So if we contemplate those thoughts, those ideas, that can help us to stop being angry at them. Instead of being angry at them, we feel compassion for them and even want to help them. Now, that may not happen right away. We may need to contemplate that for a while before we can experience that kind of change in our mind. But it definitely happens. It's my experience that we can really change our mind from negative and angry to more positive and soft and compassionate, and wanting to help the person, or at least wanting them to be free of suffering, wanting them to be happy and free of suffering. Another thing that can be helpful is reminding ourselves of impermanence and death. So everything is impermanent, subject to change. We are subject to change. The other person is subject to change. We're not going to live forever. We're not going to be here forever. Both of us are going to die one day, and we don't know when that's going to happen. It could actually happen any time, any day. And Buddhism says it's very important to have a positive state of mind at the time of death, to die with a positive mental state, not a negative one. And so if we're caught up in anger or some other negative state of mind, delusion, if death were to happen all at that moment, that would be really disaster. That would be a terrible mind to have at the time of death. So it may take some time to think about that and contemplate that, but that could be a very effective way of chasing away negative states of mind. We realize if I were to die at this moment, that means my mind would be angry at the time of death. Is that what I want? Would I want to die with an angry mind like this? So that might help us remember, no, I want to have a positive state of mind, not an angry state of mind. So impermanence and death can be very helpful to shake us out of a negative state of mind and get ourselves into a positive state of mind. So those are just a few of the antidotes we can use to anger. And those are things we need to do on our own. No one else can do it for us. But if you find it difficult, to change your mind by yourself, you can see your mind is caught up in anger and you just can't get yourself out of that state of mind. One thing you could try is to pray to the Buddha or to Kuan Yin or Amitabha, or whatever Buddha or Bodhisattva you feel most close to, and you feel some devotion to. So bring that Buddha or Bodhisattva to mind and pray to them. Ask for help. Please help me. Please, Buddha, help me. Please, Kuan Yin, help me. Help me, to change my mind, to not have this negative state of mind. So some people might find that method more effective than trying to use these other antidotes. Okay, so so that's about the second of the 4 keys, which is outlook, having a positive outlook, a positive perspective. So the third of the 4 keys is attention. And this means being able to stay attentive or focused on what we are doing, rather than being distracted, wandering. So it doesn't necessarily mean in meditation, but whatever work we are doing, or listening to a teaching or anything that we might be doing, being able to keep our focus on what we are doing rather than wandering here and there. So Richard Davidson says that there was a study done by Harvard social psychologists, and the study found that people spend around 47% of their waking life not paying attention to what they're doing. So that's almost half, almost 50% of their time, they're not paying attention to what they're doing. Their mind is somewhere else. And these Harvard psychologists published a paper entitled "A Wandering Mind is an Unhappy Mind." Okay. That might be hard to understand. Let me just talk a little bit more about it. So in Buddhism, we have a lot of methods for dealing with a wandering mind, a distracted mind. One of the most common basic methods we have is training ourselves to pay attention to our breath, being aware of our breath coming in and going out. So usually when people go to a Buddhist center to learn meditation, that's the first thing they learn. Just sit down, be quiet, and watch your breath coming in and going out. Bring your mind back to the breath when it does wander away, or when it gets caught up in disturbing thoughts and emotions. So it's a pretty simple practice, although when we try to do it, we discover that it's not really that simple. It's actually difficult, very difficult to keep our mind focused. So for example, Thich Nhat Hanh, this is a practice that he teaches very much, many books by Thich Nhat Hanh, teaching mindfulness of the breathing. And so he says, just sit down and think, breathing in, I know that I'm breathing in, breathing out, I know that I'm breathing out. Or just keep it simple and just say to yourself, breathing in, breathing out, and so on. So when we are paying attention to our breath, then our mind can't be doing other things. It can't be thinking angry thoughts or jealous thoughts or anxious thoughts or greedy thoughts or getting lost in fantasies and daydreams. So when we're paying attention to the breath, then our mind is right here in the present moment and the present place. And we're able to do that, it naturally brings a feeling of peace, a very peaceful experience. Although it's not that easy to do because other thoughts will come up in our mind, intrude on our meditation. And so we need to use our intelligence to look at the thoughts that have come up and decide if these thoughts are helpful and necessary, or if they are unhelpful and unnecessary. Because it isn't the case that all thoughts are wrong and bad and we should get rid of them. Some people think that, that in Buddhism, you shouldn't think about anything. You should get rid of all your thoughts as if thoughts are bad. But that's a bit extreme because, for example, if you see somebody fall down and the thought comes up in your mind, oh, I should help that person. Is that a bad thought? Is that a thought you should get rid of? Just ignore the person. Don't do anything to help them. That would be really weird. Or if you have children that need to be picked up from school and the thought comes, oh, it's almost time to go and pick up the children. I should go. Is that a bad thought that you should chase away, get rid of? And your poor kids are going to be standing there waiting for you and wondering where you are and feeling all confused and so on. So I'm just saying that to illustrate that, yeah, it's not that thoughts are bad. Not all thoughts are bad. Some thoughts are good and some thoughts are necessary. We have to think about some things. We have to take care of our children, do our work, take care of ourselves, our bodies, and so on. So thoughts related to those things are good. But other thoughts are not good. For example, if we see somebody do something that we think is wrong or bad, then our mind starts having all these negative thoughts and critical thoughts and so on. And it's really none of our business. It's not that we are the parent of that person or we are the boss of that person, and it's our responsibility to make sure they're doing what they should be doing. So it may not be any of our business, but we still get caught up thinking all these negative thoughts about them. So those kind of thoughts, we have to check. Is this helpful for me to be thinking these things? Or if our mind starts fantasizing about going on a cruise and gambling and expecting that we're going to make lots of money and then using that money to go shopping, buying lots of things that we don't really need. So just in a very short time, our mind can get caught up in those kinds of thoughts and fantasies and carried away. And is that kind of thought helpful? Those are thoughts related to attachment, to greed. And letting our mind go in those thoughts is like increasing our greed, increasing our attachment. Is that helpful? So what I'm talking about here is we need to watch our mind and see what our mind is doing, what our mind is up to, and be able to discriminate if our mind is doing things that are useful, positive, constructive, and that's fine. We should do positive things with our mind. But if our mind is getting caught up in negative ways of thinking, like anger, criticalness, judgmentalness, jealousy, greed and attachment and so on. So those kinds of thoughts are not helpful. So I think that is why that saying, or the title of the article about that survey was "A wandering mind is an unhappy mind." Because if we do let our mind just wander and do whatever it wants to do, it'll probably get itself into trouble. It'll probably end up, having greedy thoughts or angry thoughts, critical thoughts, and those kind of thoughts just lead to more suffering, more unhappiness. And so we do, in Buddhism, we are advised to do some meditation every day. And when we are doing our meditation, we should really try to keep our mind on our practice, on the breath, or whatever visualization you're doing, or mantra, or analytical meditation. So keep our mind on that object and bring it back when it wanders away. But also during the day, with other things that we are doing at work, with people, and so on and so forth, we also need to observe our mind and watch what our mind is doing. And if it is doing something unhealthy, unwholesome, unhelpful, negative, to say, no, 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 this is not helpful. This is not good. I'm not going to let my mind do that, and instead do something else with our mind. So I'll just share one more thing and then we'll stop for questions. I was looking at some things on my computer today and I found an article from 2003. It was an article in the BBC, just a short article. But the title, the heading of the article says, scientists say they have evidence to show that Buddhists really are happier and calmer than other people. Tests carried out in the United States reveal that areas of their brain associated with good mood and positive feelings are more active. The findings come as another study suggests that Buddhist meditation can help to calm people. So anyway, it's just talking about some studies, some research that was done in America on Buddhist meditators. And they found that, yeah, Buddhist meditation can help, well, actually benefits the amygdala. This is an area of the brain which is the hub of fear memory. So that can be reduced. So there's less fear, anxiety. And they found that experienced Buddhists who meditate regularly were less likely to be shocked, flustered, surprised, or as angry compared to other people. So anyway, there's scientific evidence that Buddhist meditation really does help people to be happier and calmer and more peaceful. But we have to do it. Nobody can do it for us. Something we have to do ourselves. Okay, so I'll stop there, but there was one question that Guat Cheng sent from last week from Christine Ko. So I'll start with that question and then other people can ask questions as well. So the question is, due to the current situation we are facing, I am working from home most of the time. Therefore, I have the time to do more Dharma practices and meditation. But now I have to be back at my office table and shoulder more responsibilities. My question is, how can I still do my usual practices with time constraint now? Even the mind is strong, the body gets tired easily. So I don't know what you mean by your usual practices. I don't know what your usual practices are, but usually there are ways that we can shorten or condense our practices so that if we don't have as much time as we would like, if we're very, very busy, we have to do other things, so we don't have all that much time to do our practices, we can condense them. For example, you can decide which parts of the practice are most important and focus on those. And then you can do, you spend less time on the parts of the practice that are not so important. So that's one way of condensing practices, shortening them. And maybe on the days when you are very busy and you have to go to work, you could even skip some of the practices if they're not commitments that you have to do. You could skip them and then do them on the weekends when you do have days off. So that's one way of dealing with that kind of problem. Another thing would be to try to get up earlier so that you can have more time in the morning to do practices before you go to work, or doing some practices while traveling to work, because doing practices doesn't mean you have to be in a particular place, in a particular posture. I mean, of course, it's better if we are able to sit in a quiet place in a meditation posture in front of an altar and do our practices there. That's much better. But we can also do practices while we are in a car, bus, train, walking, or even at work. If you take a break at work, you can do your practices there. So there's ways of doing practices during our day. And also, there are practices we can do while we are working. For example, watching the mind, observing the mind, what kind of thoughts are coming up in the mind, and noticing if there are negative thoughts. And if there are any negative thoughts, then trying to apply antidotes to them, not letting your mind get carried away in those negative thoughts. So that's a practice we can do anytime, anywhere. And it's actually something we should do, because otherwise our mind can get carried away with negative thoughts, and that's not helpful. Another practice is just trying to keep a feeling of kindness and compassion and openness towards all the people you meet, all the people around you. So that's a practice. And it's good. I mean, to be able to do that practice, it's good to have people around you. So you have more objects towards who you can have those feelings. And then the practice of ethical conduct, just trying to make sure that the actions we do are virtuous and not non-virtuous. So always trying to keep our behavior virtuous and avoid non-virtuous behavior. So again, when we're at work or we're out with people, that's a practice we can do. And you don't need to make a big show of that. For example, if your friends invite you to go to a pub and have a drink, you don't have to say something like, oh no, I'm a Buddhist, and the Buddha said we shouldn't drink alcohol. So if you say that, that will probably just make your friends uncomfortable. So you don't have to say that. You could just say, just be friendly and say something like, I'm sorry, but I have other plans. And that may not be a lie, because in your mind, in your heart, you might be thinking, I want to spend my time doing Dharma practice or Dharma study rather than going to a pub. So it's not a lie to say, no, I have other plans. But it's just, not to avoid being rude or nasty to them. So these are just some examples of ways that we can practice the Dharma, even while we're out and we're at work or with people and so on. So we should think that Dharma practice isn't just what we do when we're sitting at home on our meditation cushion or in the temple, in the center. So a big part of Dharma practice is being careful about what we do all the time, as much as possible, watching our body, watching our speech, watching our mind, and really trying to avoid doing things that are non-virtuous, and instead trying to do things that are virtuous. And if we do make mistakes, we shouldn't beat ourselves up and feel terrible, feel guilty, because there's the practice of purification. We can always purify any mistakes that we make, any non-virtue that we may create. So those are just the thoughts that I had for that question. I hope that was helpful. And if there are any other questions, you can either put them in the chat box, or you can raise your hand and unmute yourself and ask them.
Yes, Cindy actually has a question. Hold on, I'll unmute her.
Okay. Cindy?
Somehow it doesn't. Hold on.
Hi.
Okay.
Good morning, Venerable.
Morning.
This is a very common question that I always have in my mind. So I like to take this opportunity to clarify. Do we try to focus on the breath whenever we have negative thoughts like anger, anxiety, other than during meditation, or even when we are restless, or doing nothing, instead of wild thoughts, but bring our thoughts to the breath during such time. Can you hear me?
Well, for a moment you were frozen and I couldn't hear anything. So
sorry.
could you, no, I think it's something to do with I just got a message on my screen saying that my internet connection is unstable.
Oh.
So probably here.
Okay.
So you could say it again?
Oh, sure. Do we try to focus, all right, on the breath whenever we so-called like have negative thoughts like anger or even being anxious? Try to bring the mind to the breath instead of being carried away with the anger or the anxiety. So in other words, it's not like focusing on the breath during the meditation alone, but even in such instances, would it be helpful?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think I spoke about that maybe the first evening. Because I was reading this book called Buddha's Brain by Rick Hansen, who's a neuropsychologist. And it's all about the brain, but about meditation, about Buddhist practice and how the two interact. And in there he said that the breath, focusing on the breath has a natural calming effect on our body. He said we have these two different systems. One is called the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. One is the fight or flight response, where we get tense, ready to fight or run away or whatever when we feel afraid or angry. And so I can't remember which one is which, but anyway, that's one of the systems that gets activated. And then the other system is when we're kind of resting, relaxed, calm. And so watching the breath, being aware of the breath, has the effect of activating the calm, restful system. So it does naturally have this effect on our body, but also on our mind. Yeah, because when you're, like I was saying, when you're focusing on your breathing, paying attention to your breath coming in and out, your mind can't do other things at the same time. It can't be thinking negative thoughts, anxious or angry or whatever. So naturally, those thoughts don't get attention, they don't get increased by focusing on the breath. Of course, there'll probably be some conflict going on. You're trying to focus on your breath and those thoughts are still trying to come in to take your attention away. But yeah, if you just really are very determined to not let your mind get carried away with the negative thoughts and focus on the breath. I mean, it's easy to focus on the breath because it's there. We're breathing all the time anyway. So it's kind of an easy thing to focus on. We don't have to look at anything or bring up anything. We just focus on the breath that's happening. So it does have the effect of keeping us calm. And that can help to not get caught up in the other thoughts.
Similarly, if we are restless, our mind is while waiting for friends and all that. Would it also be positive that we instead of thinking anything else. Similarly, we can concentrate on the breath, even though we are not in a so-called meditation state of mind. Yeah.
So you're saying when you're having to wait for something, then
Instead of looking at the handphone all the time, and then we are all caught up reading messages.
yeah, focusing on the breath, also focusing on sensations in the body, just bringing your awareness into the body, into the present moment, just paying attention to what is happening. I mean, this is a Buddhist practice that's actually for the purpose of gaining insight into the true nature of things, like the impermanent nature of things, how everything is changing, nothing is permanent. So mindfulness of the body, mindfulness of the breath is really for that purpose, to see the true nature of things. But it's also a practice that helps us to stay calm and peaceful rather than our mind getting carried away with unhelpful thoughts that probably just make us more tense and more unhappy. So, yeah, but there's other practices as well you could do, like reciting a mantra. Some people like to recite Om Mani Padme Hum or the name of Amitabha. So everyone has their favorite mantra or prayer that they can do. So that's another thing you could be doing rather than letting your mind get caught up in something unhelpful or even negative.
Thank you very much, Venerable.
Thank you.
Catherine has raised hand. I'll unmute her.
Okay, yeah.
Hello, Venerable.
Hi, Catherine.
Long time no see and here. I have one question is that when you focus on your breath, which is something to do with sensation of a physical body, how does that transform the mind, which is a mental entity itself? How does something that you focus on, which is physical, transform something that is mental?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's true that it's our body that's breathing. Breath is an activity of our body. But how is it that we are aware of our breath? How is it that we perceive or experience our breath? According to Buddhism, it's our mind. It's our mind that is aware of the breath coming in and going out, the sensations of the breath. So that's our mind. So we have these six different types of mind in Buddhism. So 5 are related to our physical senses, like seeing visible objects, hearing sounds, smelling odors, tasting tastes like sweet or sour, and then the feeling sensations in our body. So hot and cold and pain and hunger and so forth. So that's one type of mind, having physical sensations. And then the 6th type of mind is all our thoughts, our memories, and so on. So anyway, bodily sensations, physical sensations related to our body, it's actually the mind that is experiencing those. The body itself doesn't experience things. The body is just, skin and blood and bones and cells. And it's not the body that's experiencing something like the breath. It's our mind. It's our mental, the part of us that is the mind that is experiencing the breath. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for clarifying. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any questions from the other participants? You can either raise hand and we'll unmute you, or you can list it in the chat. Anyway, remember while we're waiting, actually, I think I may have asked this question before, but I kind of forgot the answer. With regards to the 4 immeasurable, is there a logical sequence to how it is being practiced?
Is there a logical sequence? Well, there's actually different versions of the prayer. So like the short version, which just has 4 lines, like may all beings be happy and so on. May all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness, that one. So that starts with love, compassion, and then joy and equanimity. And that's the sequence. Another version of the prayer, which is longer, starts with equanimity. How wonderful it would be if all sentient beings were to abide in equanimity, free of attachment and aversion, holding some close and others distant. May they abide in equanimity. I myself will cause them to abide in equanimity. Please, Guru Buddha, enable me to do this. Something like that. So that's the longer version of the prayer. And there, equanimity comes first. So I don't know if it really matters which order you go in. I mean, in a way, like when we do the when we meditate on the 7-point cause and effect method for developing bodhicitta, that starts with equanimity. And then you go on to think about the kindness of mother sentient beings and generate love and compassion. So it starts with equanimity, because they say that equanimity is like making the ground level before you start to build on it. Before you build a house or a building, first you have to make the ground flat and level. So in a similar way, before we start cultivating love and compassion and all these positive thoughts for others, we have to make sure that our attitude towards others is equal, rather than I like these people, but I don't like those people. So I'm going to generate love and compassion for them, but not for them. So that's wrong. So we do have to, have this even-minded attitude towards everyone and recognize that everyone deserves our love and our compassion and so on. So that's, I think, the reason why sometimes equanimity is placed first. But on the other hand, equanimity is quite difficult. And in a way, maybe love is easier, at least for some people, because we already have love for some people. There are people we love, our family, and especially if you're a parent, if you're a mother or a father and you have children, then you already have a lot of love for your children. And so you can get in touch with that feeling of love that you have for those people. And then you think, oh, this is the way I want to feel towards everybody. And so you start working on sending that energy, that feeling towards others. So that may be a reason why in some versions love comes first, loving kindness comes first. That's easier. Compassion may be a little more difficult, because to have compassion, we have to be willing to notice suffering, look at the suffering of others, which is, our mind tends to want to recoil from suffering. Oh, I don't want to think about suffering. I don't want to look at suffering. That's very unpleasant. So that may be a little more challenging. So maybe that's why it comes after love. Love is easier. And it's very kind of beautiful and joyful. So I'm just guessing. I'm not sure. I don't know if there is a specific reason why they're in this order or that order, but those are just a few possible reasons.
Thank you.
But I've heard it also said that with regard to love and compassion, but we do need to cultivate both love and compassion, but there's no specific order regarding which one we do first. I think that's what Lama Tsongkhapa says. So maybe you can just find what's more easy for you, what works better for you. But we do need to do both.
Thank you very much. So is there any other questions from the the other participants?
Well, we can end here, and if people do have questions, they can send them in and I'll bring them up next time.
Can do. Yes. You can do that.
So next week will be our final talk of this series. So yeah, that will be your last chance. If you have questions, now send them in.
Yes.
Okay, so let's conclude with a dedication of the merit, the positive energy from coming together, spending this time together, doing some meditation and listening to how we can have more positive states of mind, positive thoughts and feelings in our mind, and that will be good for us to feel more peaceful and happy, but also good for others, because then we'll have more positive energy in our way of relating to others and bring positive energy to them and to the world as well. So this has been a really positive way of spending our time. We've definitely created some merit, some positive energy. So let's dedicate it, share it with all other people, all other beings, all over the world, all over the universe. May it help them to have greater peace of mind, happiness, and have less suffering and the causes of suffering, especially ignorance, greed, and hatred. And may it help everyone get closer to enlightenment, Buddhahood, the highest state possible, the fulfillment of our highest potential. And we can also dedicate for the long lives of our precious spiritual teachers, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, Ken Rinpoche Geshe Chuni, and all other teachers who are teaching the precious Dharma to living beings, enabling us to learn how to follow the path that leads out of suffering and to enlightenment. So may they live very long and healthy lives, and may their work and activities be successful. Okay, so thank you, and I wish all of you a good weekend and a good week, and see you next week.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Venerable. Thank you. Bye. See you next week.
Thank you.
See you next week.
Thank you very much.